In terms of just some housekeeping rules, please feel free to unmute yourselves, raise your hand, add to the chat. Let's, as I said, keep this very conversational, very informal. Want to make sure that everybody feels as if they have an opportunity to interact as part of this webinar. We certainly don't want to talk at you the whole time. So be generous with your comments and your contributions. On the next slide, just to give you a little bit of an overview of what we're going to cover. We've got a couple of updates on our end that we're excited to share with you all. And then we have our colleague, Sarah Schad from the National Association for Workforce Boards, otherwise known as NAWB, who's going to talk a little bit about her experience with talent pipeline management, but also how she has thought about the role and the potential opportunity for TPM to inform the work of workforce boards. And then we're going to have a group discussion about where there are opportunities to collaborate with workforce boards and where we all might be able to learn from one another, all with the intent, of course, of kind of maximizing our efforts and ensuring that we are expanding as much impact as possible for those in our community. Throughout, we hope that folks are going to ask questions, going to contribute to conversation. Since we do have a smaller group, I think we probably will stay as a large group rather than go into breakout rooms, but do want to make sure that folks feel as if they can contribute. And then if you yourself have any updates that you would like to share with the network, please feel free to be thinking about what those are and share them with the group at the end of the call. But with that, we'll go ahead. Are there any questions before we jump into some updates from the U.S. Chamber Foundation team? All right, I went with 9 seconds just to make sure that I give people a little bit of an extra chance. But let's go ahead and jump into our updates. As always, as you guys know, we like to stay busy at the U.S. Chamber Foundation, particularly with our TPM National Learning Network. So for those of you who have not yet enrolled, but do have implementation experience and want to apply to become a TPM verified talent supply chain manager, this is the peer review process that we've been piloting for the last 1.5 years, 2 years or so. It's finally made public. And we now have a course on the TPM CoLab platform that you can enroll yourself in to fill out the application for peer review. Now, I know 1 week doesn't seem like a ton of time to work on that application, but if this is something that you have had on your mind as something you'd like to explore, I would highly encourage you to check out the website that Mike was kind enough to just pop in the chat. So that you can familiarize yourself with the process and the competencies that you would be evaluated by if you decided to submit for the peer review. This will be a biannual review process, so we will have 2 applications open each year. This application has been open since October, so we will likely have our next application open sometime this summer. But folks who apply in February will be alerted of their whether they receive the credential or not, or if we need additional information and from 60 days from their submittal. So excited to get into that process and make that public, since we currently have 8 TPM verified talent supply chain managers looking to bring more folks into the fold and have your great work looked at and applauded by your colleagues and have this advanced recognition within the TPM National Learning Network. So please feel free to let us know if you have any questions, but we're excited to review the applications that are coming in. The next thing that we wanted to mention is the TPM Peer Mentor Program. This is a new element of TPM offerings that we introduced last year. So if you're looking for some mutual support with other members of the TPM National Learning Network and want to be paired with a peer mentor, Mike just popped the application link into the chat, and really excited to connect more folks and make our community feel a little bit smaller. So those applications are due on February 28th, and we estimate it takes about 10 minutes to fill out the application. So what do you have to lose? And you'll be paired with someone based on what your intent of the peer mentor program is, like how frequently you want to be connected with a person, what type of guidance are you looking for, but also learn more about the support that you can offer. But highly encourage folks to consider the peer mentor program. And then we do have a blended learning cohort that is kicking off on March 4th. So we'll have Vincent Ginsky and Cami Welch as TPM Academy faculty members. So if you're trying to connect some of your colleagues and your peers to TPM Academy training, here's a great opportunity for that blended learning cohort starting off in just a couple of weeks. So Mike was kind enough to add the enrollment links for those courses. And then finally, tomorrow, we have the monthly TPM Connections call hosted thanks to our partnership, our colleagues at the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, Dorian Moe and Mike Lewis from our team co-facilitate those calls. And tomorrow we'll be featuring Andrew Van Chow, who's going to talk about his experiences in manufacturing and STEM. And I think he's also had some energy experience as well, supporting communities in his home state of Texas. So thank you, Mike, for posting Dorian's email in the case that you would like to join what I think we more informally refer to as TPM group therapy sessions. So I know that a lot of colleagues on today's call have participated in those in the past. So let's go to the next slide just to make sure that folks have an opportunity to register for the remaining engagement webinars, and would honestly just love y'all's thoughts on how we can make these more interactive, more value added for you. We want to make sure that any type of continued learning experience or just connection experience is one that is really worthwhile for you all. So we never mind a smaller group, because sometimes, you know, quality over quantity. But in the case that you guys have any thoughts as to how we might be able to make these webinars a really good use of your time, we would always welcome that insight, because we don't have the whole year planned out yet. So the dates that we have on the books are before you, and you can follow those links in order to register for our remaining webinars for this year. So any questions before we continue on? Okay, with that, as we introduce our colleague Sarah from the National Association for Workforce Boards, I just want to do a little bit of table setting in terms of why this topic, you know, how it came about. And one thing that I want to make sure folks understand that we acknowledge at the U.S. Chamber Foundation is that, you know, we have never determined that there should only be one type of organization that can serve as the host organization, right? So we typically find that business-facing organizations are very well positioned to play that role of host organization, the one convening the employers, because business-facing organizations often have what key element in the TPM process? What's that one word we're looking for? What do you have to have from employers for a successful TPM implementation? Anyone willing to help me out? I'll give you a hint. It starts with a T.
Trust.
Trust. Yes, you have to have trust. And so our key question so often when we are facilitating the TPM framework is, as we think about who makes sense to play that role of host organization, who has the trust of the business community? Because we know in TPM, you know, we're asking for proprietary data, and we're asking employers to trust us with their time and their knowledge. So having that established trust with the group of employers is absolutely essential. But that looks different from community to community, right? Because there's another element that goes into this of successful TPM implementation, and that's capacity. What is the capacity of the organization to be able to facilitate the process, to serve as the liaison between the employers and the education training providers and so many others that make up kind of that talent ecosystem? And so what I want to make sure we're being really clear on the front end of this webinar is we're not suggesting that only workforce boards should play the role of host organization, nor are we suggesting that workforce boards cannot play the role of host organization. We ultimately believe that it really does depend from community to community who is best positioned to play that role. What we do firmly believe is that no matter who is playing that host organization role, that collaboration with other like-minded organizations and leadership that are all working towards that same end goal of trying to promote shared value for folks in their community, be it the students and workers, the education and training partners, the employers, how is it that we can better align our efforts and leverage one another's areas of subject matter expertise where we have capacity so that we can really maximize our efforts together. So that's what we want to be really clear in, is that the point of this webinar is not to make the case for workforce boards serving the host organization role. It's to make the case that no matter where you sit in your community in terms of if you're the host organization or if you represent the workforce board or if you are playing some other role, is trying to better understand what is the world that workforce boards live in and how does that align with what we're trying to accomplish with talent pipeline management. So really excited for Sarah to be joining us, bringing in this national perspective as well as this lived experience of supporting communities that are using the TPM process to talk a little bit about workforce boards, the function that they play, and then again, just kind of leverage some of the firsthand implementation experience that she has seen with TPM. So with that, I will throw it over to Sarah.
Thank you so much, Jamie. You were very close, I will say. So my name is Sarah Shade, but if you were German, you would say Schada. So I'm very proud of my last name. I actually, it's a nod to my grandmother and my great grandmother. So yeah, so Sarah Shade, I am a program manager at National Association of Workforce Boards. I'm happy to be here. I live in Wisconsin, Milwaukee to be exact, but I am seeing snow, schools are canceled. You might hear some little feet pounding above me. I've told them to be quiet for this, so we'll see. Yeah, so I most of my career's been in Wisconsin. I've been at the national level with a couple organizations, so I do have some actual boots on the ground experience with TPM, and I will be sharing from our work at NAWB as well. So I'm going to share my presentation, and I have to say, thanks to AI, you are getting my AI generated headshot. That is what they decided to do. And I was happy with this one. So again, I'm program manager at NAWB. And for those that do not know, we are a membership organization. Anyone that is not a member, we do support and represent over the 550 state and local workforce boards across the country, who represent all their 12,000 business members. So this is our mission, and we have new leadership, and we are rolling out new membership benefits all the time to help serve and really have the engagement be efficient, be beneficial for everybody, that whole return on investment. And this is the little fact that not a lot of people understand for NAWB. So these are our 4 buckets of programs that we do run. And you can see that we have our feet in a lot of areas on apprenticeship models, system building. I am in that little lower bucket of the skills economy, and I am running the Skills First Hiring Innovations for Future Transformation project. And we also dabble into the SNAP E&T and that economic mobility. So these are all of the programs that we have right now that our members can be engaged in. And that is one of the programs I'm running. I am currently in a community of practice for the skills economy and how LERs are fitting into that. So that is my current project. But when we get down to the topic of why workforce boards can be involved with TPM. So again, the host organization within the region, within the community, it just depends on their current workforce development ecosystem. We're using the word ecosystem a lot these days, and it can mean different things for different people and different regions, different states. How you are maybe classified as the 501c3 and maybe not government. All of them are running different. So within my community practice specifically, I have states that are running it, and then I have local boards that are running their programming. So it just depends on how they sit at the table. So these are some of the questions that you can think about as a workforce board within your community. Do you have current initiatives that are aligning with this strategy? Do you have a talent need? Do you have a skills gap? Who is at your table? And specifically for workforce boards, how you're structured and how your funding does come to the table is, do you have the resources for the capacity of this kind of a role? You know, do you have the staffing? Do you have the funding? How is the alignment with the projects that you are working on? Does your organization as a workforce board already developed a best practice for collaboration of how you bring people to the table? Are you at the center of that? Or are you a participant, depending on who that trusted entity in the community is? How do you bring yourself to the table? And obviously, do you already have TPM? Do you already have sector strategies? How does sector strategies and TPM work together? We all know that DOL has put out their new framework for sector strategies. It's very similar to, I believe, how they rolled out the new CTE categories for all of that. And they're trying to make a better alignment so we're not all in silos. And then what is the pain point that all your stakeholders share? Is it in talent management? Is it the skills gap, or is it the body gap, I guess you want to call it? Do you have enough people within your community to fill the jobs? Is there a disconnect with all of the partners at the table of what that labor market information really looks like? So these are the kind of questions that you would ask yourself as a workforce board if you are looking at bringing TPM into your community, or if you have already, what is your role at the table? How do you set up that partnership and that understanding, or that, you know, if you have MOUs or any kind of agreements with everybody, is it a formal collaborative? Obviously, we all are here. We know that, you know, TPM is built on that private partnership, public-private partnership. So what is the return on investment for everybody at the table? That is a huge question when you take a deep dive into this. When you have a workforce board that wants to take the lead, maybe they already have an established agreement with their community college or their technical college. That maybe that bond has already started. So that return on investment is being shown in different ways. Maybe there's a strong bond between the workforce board and the Economic Development Corporation. I have personal experience in several communities here in Wisconsin that this looked different in each of those communities. How do you build a framework that's customized to work in each of these communities, no matter who is that trusted lead, that trusted host? Obviously, is there a demand for those critical positions that are based on your high demand jobs of what your labor market needs? Are they family sustaining wages? All that data that plays into, you know, the formalization of how workforce boards serve their communities. Is the collaboration leverage the strengths of each stakeholder? So when you look at all of the stakeholders that are at the table, what is the strength of each? And like Jamie mentioned, the trust that's built maybe within the employment community, or it could be an employer-led collaborative that's already started, that has already taken the hold, or maybe this employer-led collaborative already works with your post-secondary. Or in a lot of communities that I've actually worked in, and part of my career is, has the employer-led collaborative partnered with the K-12 system and looking into really diving in on how they adapt and how they pull youth into their talent pipeline. So that's why you have to look at the collaboration that's there. Where are the gaps? How do you build on that? And how do you actually share you have to create that shared value. Is there competition? Is there accountability? That who at the table is bringing that, and that trusted talent source? Is it your community college? Is it a technical college? Is it your four-year? Is it an independent training provider? So, but when we look at it, the top outcome that everybody wants to see from TPM is that they're keeping employers engaged. So we know that for workforce development, you need the workers, learners, earners, job seekers, and you need the employers. Those are your two pieces of the formula, and how you build your partnerships and your stakeholder and your ecosystem around you. You have to keep the employers engaged. Remember also that industry-supported approach that brings together that ecosystem addresses the need for the future of work. So where are we going in the future of work? How do you build in these new concepts? Who is leading skills-based hiring in your communities? We know a lot of states have legislation and executive orders for their public sector jobs in skills-based hiring. We all are hearing all these skills-based hiring, skills movement, skills gap. This is not going away. We know it is in current administration that are looking for skills. It's been in a lot of administrations of how we, not just apprenticeships. I mean, that's a very, very strong topic, but skills-based hiring is here, and it is how you build that in. And even the team over at US Chamber Foundation is looking how to build the LERs, those learning employment records, within the strategies, weaving that through TPM strategies. So we all have a piece at the table, and how we just have to determine what role we want to play. My last slide before I just open it up is very, very lengthy. You will get this. But I think these are, yeah, that is that's a lot of words. But I wanted you guys to have those questions of what to determine and what to ask of your employer collaborations that are there, and what your education, what is your economic development partners doing, and how they all need to be aligned in what is the challenge, what is the possible solution to that challenge, and what tools are you going to use? Is TPM that tool? Will you bring that to the table? Will it be sector strategies? Will it be, there's other things, bridging the talent gap kind of stuff. So how do you bring that forward? So that is my deep dive into that. I can stop sharing and we can talk about questions in my experience within TPM, and how it looks when it is led by a workforce board, how it looks when it's led by an employer-led collaborative, and then how it's led by a chamber and workforce partnership. I have served on all three.
That's awesome, Sarah. Thank you for that perspective. And I would say we do have a good kind of mix and representation of who is on today's calls. We do have a couple of folks that represent workforce boards, but we also have got quite a few of our Chamber of Commerce folks who have been, implementing talent pipeline management for quite some time. So one thing that I think would be very helpful to those that may be less familiar in collaboration with workforce boards, or maybe have, we all can acknowledge just the way that every chamber is a chamber, that saying that every workforce board is a workforce board, like none of them are exactly the same in terms of, their previous performance and effective engagement strategies and collaboration strategies. So would love for you to maybe touch on, like, what are some of the benefits that could come if there are established TPM efforts taking place that have not yet engaged collaboration with the workforce board, like what would be the benefit for doing so? And then if you could also maybe touch on where we've heard of less effective workforce boards, like what suggestions might you have for those TPM implementation partners and trying to like crack that nut and try to be able to mutually benefit from collaboration.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm drawing on my personal experience and also, my engagement throughout our membership at NAWB. I've seen where workforce, I'm going to say this, it all comes down at the end of the day is who has the funding, who has the capacity, and who has the trust and the influence of the community. It's trust and it's influence. Who is that influential person within the community? Because sometimes it's not any of our normal thought process. Sometimes I've worked in a community where the influencer of the entire community was the president of the technical college. She held a lot of weight with what happened, but it was more of a rural community. Here in Milwaukee, on the last TPM I worked on for the water technology industry, and it was a National Science Foundation fund, NSF fund, that we were implementing TPM, and it was led by the Water Council, which is Water Technology Employer-Led Collaborative. So they have been talking about the skills gap for years and years and years. So it started with they had the money to build their collaborative as a self-sustaining collaborative, and they have the respect within the community. And then they went to Milwaukee Tech Hub, which was the IT side of it. And in that partnership and in that model, the workforce board is not at the table. So it just depends on, like I said, capacity, funding, and really who is the influencer in the community. So you want to engage, and then you want to remember when you are engaging, no matter who's at the table. I am a true believer, and I've done this when I'm leading these kind of engagements, is be transparent as you can. Everybody, leave your agenda at the door. We are all here for the purpose of serving our community. And we are serving our employers, and we are serving our job seekers and our individuals. And everybody who gains that economic mobility makes your community better. So we have to really look at the challenge and really address it. And don't just create a solution for a challenge that not everybody is aligned with. Otherwise, that's why you start getting silos and duplication. So, and then the last, I then worked in the TPM model that at a county level. And that was the partnership of the chamber in the area of the county and the workforce development area of the county. And it was a dual partnership. Both of them had equal involvement and equal responsibility and accountability in actually implementing the TPM strategy within that community. So it just depends on, again, the trust of the employers and the trust of the community.
Yeah, definitely love to open it up to questions from anybody, if anybody has any questions for Sarah. But you hit on something that I think is important to touch on when it comes down to funding, right? And this idea of ensuring that when we're starting our TPM efforts, that we're going to be able to fund them in the long term, because ultimately we're going for employer engagement, but we want long-term sustainable employer engagement, right? And so a lot of times that funding can be a huge help, particularly as we're getting things off the ground. But how can we ensure that we continue to prioritize employer return on investment, because eventually we're hoping that they will put some skin in the game, so that as they are benefiting from what solutions, have been created and implemented, based on their primary labor market information that really fuels the doing your homework stages of talent pipeline management. How can we ensure that we're setting this model up for one that's going to exist beyond any short-term, not necessarily even short-term funding, but even the uncertainty that a lot of communities are having right now around funding, is making sure that we're setting folks up for long-term success, and really leading with that is a key component of talent pipeline management as well.
And sometimes you don't have to exactly follow the 6 stages to the T all the way through. You may have to switch it up again, depending on who's at the table and what silos you have to break down, what politics you have to bring into the discussion. Those are some challenges as well.
Yeah, I think you touching on like just the willingness for collaboration and breaking down those silos can be really important, because it could be that an organization that is a business facing one, that is interested in overseeing TPM implementation, but perhaps doesn't have that funding or doesn't have all of the capacity, that might be an opportunity for collaboration to see TPM efforts through. So I appreciate you touching on that. Does anybody have any questions for Sarah, or any thoughts, reflections on what was shared?
I'll offer some reflections of what we're kind of navigating within our community. And I appreciate this conversation because we're kind of in the thick of it. So we're one of the communities that has fully embraced sector partnerships as a strategy here in Colorado. And so we, of course, at the Arvada Chamber have been champions of TPM since the OG era of 2017. And so we've long been advocating for that. And we've been working really hard in recent months to be able to integrate those two. But I think one of the interesting ahas that I've had is the level of integration you need to have to roll out TPM in a community when you're collaborating well. And that has been a challenge and an opportunity, I think, for us, that we're recognizing that even though we're trained in TPM, we really need our workforce, board, and organization to be engaged. We would need our community college to understand what TPM is, our K-12 system. And so that's been kind of an aha for me recently, is even as the business organization leading it, there's this buy-in piece that's really critical that I think we're figuring out right now how we navigate that and how we ensure that our workforce center is as engaged as we are in representing the interests of TPM in the work. So I didn't have a question in there, more of just a life is really hard at doing this comment, but I appreciate the conversation.
Well, I have to say that in my one experience, like I said, in my one experience where there was already a partnership between the chamber and the Workforce Solutions Division, they did a TPM 101 kind of with, because there was already established partnerships. I think that's what you have to look at too. What is already established? Is there a MOU between some entities that is already there that you can leverage? And then how do you build, once you've decided to do it, is like you said, to train everybody. They did put together a TPM 101. And what workforce board are you from? I have Colorado in my community practice.
We're in Jefferson County, so we work with Kat Douglas and team over there.
Okay, yeah, I have I think you might be the only ones that are not in my community practice, but
shoot.
Yeah, Renice at the state wrangled a lot together. So yes.
Yes. And we have some exciting things happening here in Colorado with improved alignment. And I know these are all part of what we're working towards. So I love that this is the conversation today. And the more we can talk about the collaboration between workforce centers and chambers and economic development groups, I think the better we all will be. But the missing piece right now is alignment. So here we are.
Yeah, if I can admit, like in a dream world for us, is that, we would be able to leverage people's firsthand experiences, both the ups and the downs, to create some type of resource for you all, even, a quick and dirty 101 on how do we meet that alignment. I think that is, a big part of strategy 5 in talent pipeline management and building talent supply chains and trying to better figure out how, now that employers have collected this information, how can we better use that? How can we communicate it? And then how can that be used in a way that kind of aligns those incentives, right? That's part of the TPM Academy training, is trying to figure out what is everybody working towards? How can we better align our efforts and achieve our mutual goals, while also recognizing that they might not all be mutual. So, how are we going to do that in an effective way that makes use of the public and private sector resources that we have available to us? So maybe this is a good transition. Really appreciate that input from the Arvada Chamber perspective, Cami. But maybe this is also a good transition for our group discussion, just to learn more about people's experiences in collaboration. So Jackie, do you want to get that kicked off for us? And Michael Lewis will be taking notes in our Google document, and we'll share that out with everybody afterwards too, so that you can capture, you make use of the captured learning lessons.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie, and sure. I will introduce myself just in case everybody there doesn't know me, and some of you do. My name is Jackie Rondo. My title is Director of Employer Engagement for Maritime, and I work for the Hampton Roads Workforce Council, which is a workforce development board in the southeasternmost tip of Virginia. And a question that we wanted to ask for discussion is, what experience does everybody here have collaborating with workforce boards for your community's workforce efforts? It doesn't have to be necessarily using TPM, but just collaborating in general with your local workforce board? Anybody?
I can go ahead and jump in. Kevin
Okay.
from Michigan Works West Central, Baldwin, Michigan. So I've been with the agency for 3.5 years. Uh, Started in on the front desk, just working with people seeking employment, and then moved into business services. Inherited a program called MICA 3.0, which is now SSELC. And basically what it is, it's an employer-led collaborative part functioning between partners in our West Shore Community College and Kirtland Community College. And then we specialize our funding in public service sector. So law enforcement, EMT, paramedic training. Basically, COVID kind of came around and pushed the buttons that made this all come together. And since I've started doing TPM training, I'm just getting into that process. They told me TPM was an important part of all that. The way we've functioned and it's been designed, I think the foundation was there, but I think there wasn't enough education on how it was actually supposed to function. So it's really a group of participants, employers, partners that I'm reaching out to kind of playing the role of champion, and especially since we're bringing some of the funding to the game. And I know it's meant to be a bigger thing, but it's really in our area. And I don't know if it's just rural Michigan where we're at. It tends to be more of one-on-one connections seem to be the best way to get things done and make things happen. And as I've started into the training, I'm just like, oh, wouldn't it be great if this worked the way that the training goes? So it's kind of inspiring to be like, oh, we could do so much more with this. But you don't know what you don't know. So
So you're with a workforce board, right?
yes, yep.
Okay. And I should back up a little bit. I've been with the council for 13.5 years. Most of that time was spent in the direct service center portion of the council, doing business services. That's what I was originally hired on for in 2011.
Okay.
But that's, primarily managing federally funded programs for businesses, which is a very different ballgame than what we do with TPM.
Sure.
But what it did do is allow me to establish all of those relationships for all of those years with those businesses that I just carried over into here.
Sure. Yeah, this has been great. I appreciate the invite that I got the other day. And I was like, oh, the more I can learn, the more the experts can share and impart their wisdom. It's a beautiful thing.
So is there anyone here who is not working with it does not work for a workforce board, but has an experience working collaboratively with a workforce board
Sandra has
that
her
would like to
hand up.
share?
So, hi, I'm Sandra Howe, and I hold two hats right now. I am the Vice President of Talent Innovation and Community Development for the Greater Memphis Chamber in Tennessee, but I am also the interim executive director for our local workforce development board. So, Jackie, in answer to your question, it's yes and no. So what's interesting is that the chamber has been appointed by our CLEO as the fiscal as well as the administrative entity for the Greater Memphis Local Workforce Development Board. And, a lot of people ask us, I don't think there's a whole lot of chambers across the country that are in this space. And
No, I
so
don't think so.
we get a lot of questions about why, and so, the main thing is when you really think about it, being able to leverage the resources of a chamber of commerce and their employer connections with the
Right.
resources and the funding provided through the Greater Memphis through the workforce boards, not just the Memphis boards. That's like the ideal situation, right? And so we've been in this space now for probably a little less than a year officially. But our hope is really to be able to, again, leverage the resources of both entities to be able to expedite processes and getting funding to the individuals and the companies that it's intended to do.
Right.
It's to grow our capacity as a region. We have a workforce team and a business services team on the chamber side that focuses on economic development. And then we have, the programmatic team, as well as the business services team on the workforce board side. And so we're merging those teams, right? So then when we go out to meet with a company or to meet with individuals, you have the best of two worlds that are working in collaboration with you. So we're super excited about that space. But what it ultimately, our hope is that by having this collaboration, we're not just building talent pipelines, but we're closing those pipelines, right? There's an end because there's employers at the end, and people, once they go through the training, the identification of a career, the training, there's employers already at the end of the pipeline to pull them out of it and put them in great careers. So we're super excited about that opportunity, and we have a lot of big goals. And then we'll also be working really closely to stand up a TPM cohort that will be added to this structure, which I have been waiting for years to be able to do in Memphis. So thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Lexi. We're super excited about that.
Well, that is a really unique model, and I think there's probably a lot of power in that. I'd be interested in learning exactly how that came about sometime.
Absolutely.
Sandra, I commend you on everything. Having that 51% business part of your board helps to have that employer voice right there at the table every quarter, month, however often you all are meeting and engaging. And I'm Steve Golis with the Bay Consortium Workforce Development Board. But the feedback that you're giving us is if you found a great way to blend the two together, as well as take on a lot of responsibility.
Yes.
Being a workforce board, wearing many hats and the oversight that comes along with that. But that's a perfect fit for the TPM model, having those employer voices already at the table and really being able to feed into those sector strategies. As we're looking at the revamped sector strategies and the opportunity, you have the capacity, the funding, and you have the buy-in right now, depending on the composition of your board and what it's made up of in terms of the business sectors. But I look forward to hearing more about it as it grows and evolves as well.
Right. We look forward to sharing more about it. It's the board is very active and supportive of this model. And they have taken the lead on restructuring some policies already to make sure that we are utilizing the businesses more on all of our committees, and that there's a cross alignment between the chambers committees as well as the workforce board committees without us being self-serving, right? That's the battle. You don't want it to look like or feel like you're self-serving. And so we make sure that everything is open up to all businesses, not just chamber investors or chamber members. But they're the ones that are nipping, the quickest at it. So, but we do invite and include all businesses from the community.
And that's kind of a segue right into our next question about what the benefits are of collaborating with workforce boards. And I think you've given us a couple of great positives to focus on. Does anyone else have anything that they'd like to provide in terms of feedback as to how they've worked collaboratively with their workforce boards in their local area or with the state workforce board? I'm giving it the 9 seconds, but I'm not hearing anything. Sandra, could you expand a little bit more on some of the benefits that you all have seen? I know you gave us a little bit of insight into that. Have you had any instances where you've had businesses come to the table and they've sought to become members of your workforce board, and it's really grown the opportunities for those smaller businesses to have a voice in your community?
That's it's real interesting because we're actually going through a period of having new appointments to the board.
Mhm.
And so, because people have just rolled off, their time is up and they're choosing not to be reappointed, or the Clio has decided not to reappoint them, but we did do an outreach. And so, to our the chamber has a small business council, which was one of our priorities to try and get more small businesses. Because currently we have very large businesses, we have, Smuckers and so forth that are on our board, but really wanting to hear the voices of smaller businesses. And so we did do outreach to our small business councils. There's a couple of them, one we lead and one that we partner with. And so several of those individuals stepped up and said they would love to be nominated. And then we've also looked at our industry councils, which are a lot of small businesses that belong to the industry councils. And several of those individuals also stepped up and said they would love to serve on the board. And so we did nominate them, if you will, to the Clio, but that was actually on our executive committee agenda today, an update on what's happening with the nominations. And so stay tuned on that too. But we did have a very focused and concentrated effort to get more small businesses on the board.
And then I think that gives us a real focus on the better alignment with the labor market trends, that the workforce board is able to really give a forecast as to what it's going to look like in the development of their local plans, their mission, their values, so on and so forth. And it really it speaks volumes to what you can do for your local community. The regions don't end just at the border. We work together collaboratively with other boards that are surrounding us on a daily basis. And
did I freeze?
I was about to say, I was like, I thought that I froze, but maybe maybe it was actually Steve. But if it's okay, I know we only have a couple minutes left. I would love to ask the question of those who are either working for a workforce board or have had experience. What might be like a service or a function of a workforce board that not everybody knows that a workforce board does that could be helpful to talent strategies? So something that maybe not all of us would know about workforce boards. Does that make sense?
Well, I can say that here in Hampton Roads, our workforce board, and I'm really used to it, so it doesn't seem different to me. Maybe it's different, but we have for many years been served as and been recognized as the convener of all parties, really, in the region. So we bring together very routinely, business and education and government, and we do that for many reasons at many different times, and it's expected that we will do that. If there's a problem in the community, something that needs to be addressed, it's expected that we will bring people together to work on that. And I don't know that it's like that everywhere.
Any thoughts from other folks?
I think that's a really good best practice, being that convener. We definitely haven't done that here. And honestly, it's because our workforce board doesn't have, the reputation to be able to bring a number of individuals to the table. We've done it from the chamber's perspective, but we're hoping that our reputation will be able to lend that. And I think that is a best practice that we'll look at.
So with Stephen, we're glad you were able to make it back. We're starting to close out, and I do want to leave just 2 minutes in the case that anybody has anything to share. But something that I'm kind of curious to know is, this is the first time that I would say we've had this type of conversation about collaboration with workforce boards in such like an intentional way. Like it's definitely, come up before more spontaneously, but I'm kind of curious to hear from you all, again, both representing workforce boards and those that aren't representing workforce boards, do you feel like any resources or support to kind of capture some of these best practices would be of use to your TPM implementation efforts? Or is there anything that the, anything that the Chamber Foundation can do to support you all? Because I think that one thing that all of us have in common is trying to achieve more impact.
My apologies first for getting cut off. A number of things that I think the Chamber is really on the cutting edge of is some of the technology and the tools for workforce development that you all have been working on implementing. Some of the AI tools, as well as the learning management systems and the career pathway tools, have been very helpful to us so far that we learned about recently. And I think as the communities evolve, those tools are going to become more and more important in our engagement and leadership within these collaboratives.
That's helpful, Steve. Thank you. And we would
I-
love for more people to be involved in JobSide.
I like what Sarah said in the chat about really digging in about why the Workforce Development Board is not at the table. Might be uncomfortable, but necessary. Yes, because boards are so different from place to place, across the country. My question here in this particular location is why is the Chamber not at the table? I would love to have the Chamber at the table with me.
My personal experience is, again, it's an uncomfortable conversation, but some chambers are just not run the way that others are, and especially in smaller communities.
Yeah, and we see
When
that
you have a
across the
metro
board.
area, when you have a metro area, it's so much smoother. I believe it's just about, the leaders at each table putting their personal or professional agendas aside and really digging deep into why. And that's why sometimes it's uncomfortable. And I've been at the table in those very uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah, we're not the ones to shy away from uncomfortable conversations. So what I would, as we close out, and if anybody has anything that they'd like to share with the network, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll call upon you. But just kind of like a closeout message from us is to think about, where there are collaboration opportunities that perhaps we have not explored to the degree that we should and we could. Because again, if there are resources, public sector resources that could potentially be influenced by existing TPM implementation efforts or future TPM implementation efforts, at the end of the day, that could help get a lot more wins on the board for employers and most definitely for students and workers. So how can we as a community support one another in exploring what does that look like in certain communities? What could that look like in certain communities? And we know that we need to come to people where they are and acknowledge, like, to the exact point that you just made about workforce or about chambers, the same can be said of workforce boards. And so how can we all think about, okay, based on the context of what my community is experiencing, where are there opportunities for us to drop the silos, drop the territorialness, as I like to say, so that we can achieve that bigger impact. And so I would love for our network to explore that together. Maybe the Greater Memphis Chamber would be a wonderful case study, since it's relatively new that Sandra's playing this interim ED role, and see, like, okay, what could this look like? I had mentioned in the chat that Las Vegas Chamber is serving now as an American Job Center and has people trained that are members of their chamber staff playing that role. And I think that we just need to start to put on the board, okay, what are the questions that we should be asking one another, coming from a place of mutual respect? But sometimes they will be challenging questions, but again, always with the intent of how can we really maximize our efforts to benefit our communities. So I appreciate folks' willingness to have the, sometimes difficult, uncomfortable conversation, but at the end of the day, I think we're all trying to get those wins on the board for our community. So always excited and grateful to have those conversations with you guys. But did anybody have anything that they would like to share with the group?
A final thought from me would be there's a no wrong door approach that needs to be taken by all parties involved. I think, breaking down those silos is key. but working collaboratively. We have to do that to get the wins. It's getting more and more challenging to try to, for one organization to try to carry all of the burden themselves to do every aspect of it when you can collaborate with those already at the table. So
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, hopefully we will see you all on May 15th. If anybody has any feedback or ideas for future engagement webinars, please let us know. But great to see you all.